So please give a warm welcome on stage to Curtin.
Who wants to do my slides? Just point at you. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. Yes. Everybody awake? All right, well, we'll be in Africa soon. Don't worry, it'll be fun. I practiced my speech a bit. I wasn't going to use the cards, but they told me I should give the speech in English, so I had to make some English notes. I've been practicing my German this year. Right. The last couple of speeches I've given you have been okay, and maybe some entertainment, but today you're actually going to learn something. Are you ready to learn something? What do you think you can learn from me? What do you think? Any ideas? Exactly, right? No matter who you are, if you just met me this week, or if you've known me for 3 or 4 years, you know that I march to the beat of my own drummer. It's a phrase we use. Maybe I dance to my own music, or whatever you say in your country. This could be a bad thing for society, but it's great for me. It's great for me because I like my music, and it's taken me 15 years to kind of become comfortable understanding why I do things. And it's helped me go through a lot. I've gone to psychologists, imagine that. And a lot of doctors have said that if you understand why you do things, it can help you through guilt, it can help you through loneliness, exploring sexuality, depression, sexual depression. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share a bit about philosophy. Wow. And philosophy is not just a bunch of old people talking about rocks and life from thousands of years ago. I'm going to let you know how philosophy can affect you in your day-to-day life. Little things like doing your laundry, getting coffee, waking up in the morning. Right? You can kind of examine your life and kind of see what are the rules that you're living by. Because all of us have a code. We do. Now, you may not know what it is, right? What's your code, Robbie? See? He doesn't know. We don't know what it is. It's not easy to define, but he lives by a code. He does things a certain way. He's used to certain things. And he feels more comfortable in his skin being himself, whatever that is, right? I know there's plenty of Germans here. Germans, raise your hands. Yes. All right. Cool. There's my timer. Nice. 37 minutes. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's counting down. Oh, thank God. I've got 3 minutes left, folks. It's counting down. All right, Germans. Lovely fella. Looks kind of like my uncle. His name is Johann Gottlieb Fichte, right? He had a great quote on philosophy. He said, the philosophy that you choose depends on the person you are. So it's not about what's the meaning of life. It's, well, who are you? And then the meaning is easy, right? All right. Now, maybe you don't want to listen to a story about philosophy, but hey, this is good for individuals, it's good for companies, it's good for projects, it's good for teams. Teams. Your team can have a philosophy, as we've just heard. There's different kinds of classical philosophy that focus on harmony with nature or seeking pleasure, like our friend Theo from NomadCruise 3. Maybe you get your morality from a god. Maybe you just think that life is suffering and crap. Whatever you think, we're going to dig into it, and I'm going to try to connect these big, heavy philosophical ideas to little tiny things that you do every day. Are you ready? All right, let's get going. Number one, could you push the button? The other button. Ooh, the laser pointer. I like that one. Ooh, oh, can you go back? Not ready yet. Sorry. I'm going to start off with my friend Socrates. Some of you call him Socrates. He didn't write anything down. He was a cool guy. He loved to debate. But the point was not to win the debates. He didn't want to go around with challenging people and beating them. Socrates' purpose was to elicit truth. He was always trying to find out what's real here. And the only way to find out what's real is to start with nothing. So he said, know nothing. I know nothing. Imagine you're building a house and you have no stones, okay? The very first stone you choose to build your house is going to be a very important stone. You want to make sure that it's sturdy and fit in the right shape. So he said, Socrates says, be critical of everything. Challenge everything. Know nothing, challenge everything. Don't take anything for granted. Don't assume. Don't rely on wishy-washy BS that someone told you. Okay? And this is how he lived his life. And it's pretty amazing. When a lot of you guys move to a new country or a new city, a good idea is to start by knowing nothing. Don't assume that you know Bali just because you saw some stickers on some laptops on NomadCruise. Right? If it's your first time there, go in as a blank book. Right? Go in as a blank book. If you want to know more about moving to a new country, I highly recommend a YouTube video called 0 to Hero in 100 Days. Okay, good. A few people got it. All right, now slide. Yes. Who knows what this is? Play-Doh. Very good. Play-Doh is not just something you eat for fun. It's also a very famous old Greek guy. He actually used to follow Socrates around and write things down that he said. This is Plato's cave. For those of you who don't know, don't want to get close to the speakers here. There's a guy in a cave looking at a wall. And there's a fire, and there's a puppet of a bird. I'm going to simplify it down because I only have a few minutes here. But basically, we're all born in the cave looking at the wall. We see a bunch of images like this bird here. And some people never leave the cave. That's just a fact. But some people climb out of the cave into the real world. They see a real bird. They understand that birds hatch from an egg. They grow up and learn how to fly and then eventually die. Right? When those people go back into the cave, they try to explain to this guy, hey, that's a shadow of a bird. Do you know that birds live in trees? Did you know that birds make these noises? And the guy in the cave has no idea. For him, his whole world is just these images here. Now, we encounter this all the time. Any freelancers? Freelancers in the audience? Okay, good. You need money, you get a new client. Maybe the client is not the best, right? They have a very different outlook on life. And it's like you're talking to a person in a cave who doesn't understand what a bird is. And the client says, oh, this is a picture of a bird. I know this. You're like, yeah. Yeah, that's a bird. But, show me how they flap their wings. I don't know. Do they eat worms in the morning? I don't know. It's very difficult. So what I want you guys to do is, in the next few months, when you're dealing with a relationship, right? Maybe you're lucky enough to be in a relationship. Maybe you have clients or a boss, or you talk to your family, maybe on Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, whatever. Try to realize, are you out of the cave? Are you the one in the real world? Are you the one in the cave? Or are you one of these jerks with the puppet masters showing the ignorant people what a bird looks like, right? Because this is very interesting. We're all a little bit ignorant here, right? Some of us speak 7 languages. Some of us don't. Right? We can all learn something. So I'm stuck in the cave in some places, and other places I'm out in the real world. Be aware of that. We just came from Greece. Okay? All right, Greece. Greeks are famous for their moderation, the golden mean, the golden ratio. Everything in moderation. You can drink ouzo, but not every meal. Right? Things like this. So if you're looking to find a philosophy to kind of bite into and try it out in your life, maybe try Greek moderation. One famous Greek's name was Epicurus. Epicurus was a clever guy. He realized that life was pointless. It's not that exciting, is it? No. He said there's no purpose in life, so you might as well just have fun. And he led the school of hedonism, by just chasing passion. If I want a grape, I'll go take a grape. I don't care whose land it is. I don't care what time of day it is. And this was the way that his crew lived their lives, and they had a good time, I guess. Hundreds of years later, a fella over up in the UK named John Locke said, wait a minute. We have to have a social contract. We need a social contract. We can't just do what we want all the time. It's ridiculous. Because the things we really want require other people to cooperate, right? So he said, if we all stop at the red light, then when we have a green light, we know we can go. There's a social contract. So how many of you have seen wet paint? Anybody? Do you touch it? Sometimes. How many of you see fresh concrete, fresh pavement with a little rope around it? Do you write your name in it? And then 10 years later you come home, you're like, I did that when I was 16. Right? That's violating the social contract. Right? That's hedonism. So we have this kind of hedonism versus social contract thing going on, which is pretty exciting. Some of you might say, Curtin, that's a bunch of hokum. That's just the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. But that's a Western idea of the golden rule. I grew up in the West, and they said, action, like do things that you want done to you. But when I lived in the East, in China, it was the opposite. They said, don't do things to people that you don't want done to you. Now this causes a problem. In American, following the golden rule, will come up to everybody and say, hi, 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 because they want to be friendly. But maybe a Chinese prefers inaction and would avoid all of you because they don't want to be bothered. The American thinks the Chinese is rude. The Chinese thinks the American is rude. They're both following the golden rule. So that doesn't work. This is why you can't just copy a philosophy. You have to look at how you do things day to day and try to match up little points on that. Speaking of the Chinese, we got to talk about Confucius, right? He's a good guy. Probably more Korean, but we'll get into that later. Confucius was never a king or an emperor or a lord or anything like that. He just gave advice to people who showed up at his house, right? Now, he was big on relationships, like parent and child, teacher and student. And his advice was, no matter who you are, figure out your relationship, like between me and Johannes. I should act like this because Johannes is the leader. Okay? It wasn't about individuality. It was about relationships. So again, freelancers, one more time, raise your hand. Okay. Sometimes you have to break a contract, right? Maybe? Anybody? Anybody do that? Yes, right? The relationship is just not working. And there are rules that say, we have these deadlines, we will provide this. But you just say, I don't want to do this for you. I don't like this. I don't like how this is going. I don't trust you. I don't like you. Whatever it is. Right? And that's my advice too. And Confucius would say, if you are a naughty child and you cannot follow these rules of parent-child, get out. Just leave. Yeah. Don't break the relationship rules. Just remove yourself from the situation. And that's my advice to you guys. Okay. I see some of you thinking it. You're like, gosh, Kurt, we don't need to hear about all this stuff. Just be a good person. Just do good things, right? Just do good. Who cares about philosophy? Well, what does that mean, just do good? Does that mean have good results? Or does that mean have good intentions? A fellow named Jeremy Bentham, he was focused on the good results. He said, if you have 3 house parties and a friend comes to your house and breaks 3 windows, are you going to invite them to the 4th party? Are you? No? I see 2 no's. Doesn't matter. Only results matter to Jeremy Bentham. They cut half their hair. What else did they do? Did they bring beer? Again, the result that matters, right? Good. Now, on the opposite side of this coin was Immanuel Kant. He said only the intention matters, right? Oh, I meant to bring beer. I wrote it down in my book, but I forgot. Is that okay? And then there's the guy who doesn't want to bring beer because he doesn't really like you, but there was a 6-pack of beer outside your apartment, and he just picked it up and brought it in. Yeah, I brought beer. Like, well, I don't know. And people struggle with this. People struggle with this because Kant says, oh, if you have good intentions, after a while, you'll have good results. And Bentham says, well, then who cares? Just focus on the results. But sometimes nasty people can do nice things, right? So we don't want to reward the bad people for accidentally helping us. Ooh, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. One way you guys can think about this decision is gym membership. Who had a New Year's resolution 2019 to do something healthy with their body? Anybody? Gym? Nobody. We're so fit. Yeah. All right. Now, some people will go to the gym purely for the benefits of the workout. They don't have to take an Instagram selfie. They don't have to feel good about the membership. Right? They just wake up, shut up, and do it. They feel good. Other people, it's more of a personal struggle. It's like, oh, I told my parents I was going to get healthy this year. I wrote it in my journal. I put it on my wall. And even just putting on the gym clothes, right, and going to the gym feels good. It feels like I've satisfied my craving to do better. You haven't even lifted a weight yet, but you've already checked it off, right? So you have to be careful. What actually matters? Is it the results? Is it the actual effect of what you're doing? Or is it more about your intention? Like, I feel like I'm trying to be healthier, which makes me proud of myself. Because it is a big difference. It is a big difference. When times get tough, you see your true colors. I see it in movies all the time. I think all right. Are we halfway through? Good. All right, guys. Almost done. I'm going to talk. Oh, yeah. Can we do the next take you on? Thank you very much. Good time. It's time to talk about the most important person of my whole 40 minutes. Are you ready? Yeah? We talked about Socrates. We talked about Plato, Kant. Who do you think the most important person is in this talk? Very good. Did you see my talk? Yeah, it's you. You are the most important person. Hard to talk about philosophy without talking about the self, right? Who am I? This is the ship of Theseus. Theseus, another Greek. I couldn't go on Cruise 9 because I've got to talk about all these Greeks here. Theseus built a big ship, had a lot of men. They rode around these waters for a few decades. Over the years, the ship was replaced piece by piece by piece. After a few decades, none of the original ship was here. So what is his ship? Is it scattered all over the world in pieces, or is this the ship, even though this didn't exist when it was originally built? Who am I? What you can take away from this is that you should always be comparing yourself to you and not to others. Compare yourself today, Saturday? Today's Saturday. Compare yourself on Saturday to yourself on Friday. How are you different from yesterday? Don't compare yourself on Saturday to her on Saturday or her on Saturday. That's no good. If we want to know about Theseus' ship, we have to look at its journey, right? Its pieces. How are you different? What have you become? If tomorrow you want to do something crazy, like join a Somali pirate gang and jump on cruise ships and do all that, you can. You can create a whole background. You can be a new person. That's your identity. It's up to you. Right? Anybody here ever lie on a CV? Right? You can be whoever you want. That's how I got this job. All right. If you have a pen, I want you to write this one down. We're talking about self-identity. How to examine yourself. Now, these nomad cruises are really fun, right? Everybody gets together and it's like, yeah, we can, all the good times. Let's talk about travel. Let's talk about business success, friendship, free mahu. But there's a negative side. I think a lot of you have wanted to talk about the downside of being a nomad. right? The last 8 cruises or so. People just kind of gloss over the icky bits. Like, oh, and I was homeless for 2 years, but then I had a website. No, tell me about the homelessness. That doesn't sound fun. So here's the icky bit for you. If you want to dig into this, if you want to, go to lunch today and say, what the heck was Curtin talking about? If you only remember one thing, do this one. And I want you to use Occam's razor on yourself. Who's Occam? Well, he's a guy who said, if you have some kind of weird situation, the most likely explanation is the simplest one. If there's money missing in your bank account, probably somebody stole it. It's not a computer error. It's not, a Martian telescope getting in the way of some laser. No. Someone stole it. So I want you to look at your own problems in life, okay? Maybe you're a very pretty person. You think you're very pretty, but every time you post a photo online, you get 0 likes. You're like, oh, no, maybe I'm not as gorgeous as I think I am. Oh, okay. It's not a bad thing. You just need to dig a bit deeper to find the truth. Maybe you think you're really funny, but the only people that laugh at your jokes, you pay them to laugh. Come when I talk at 11:30. Just an example. But use Occam's razor on your own problems, right? If you have a website and you're like, oh, how come the traffic isn't where I think it should be, right? What's the simplest solution? What's the most obvious explanation? And it's not going to be fun for a lot of you. It's going to be brutal. But as soon as you understand what the problems are, guess what? Then you can actually start working on them, right? Once you know who you are and what your ship is and what the problems are, you can start fixing. And too many times, because it doesn't feel good to work on our problems or to acknowledge our problems, we just kind of blissfully float around. What did you learn on NomadCruise? Well, I saw some good friends and I drank a lot. Yeah, but what did you learn? How'd you get better? Why are you an unstoppable force on December 15th where you weren't on November 28th? And the final thing about self is, how do we grow? All right, now that we know who we are, now that we know what our problems are, how do we get better? How do we grow? The ancient Greeks said that acquiring knowledge, acquiring facts was useless unless you knew why. Right? It doesn't matter that Sofia is the capital of Bulgaria unless you know why. Why did they choose that city? Where did Bulgaria come from? Why is it called Sofia? Does it have anything to do with the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul? It's their relationship. You need to understand the whole journey, right? You need to understand the pieces of Theseus' ship. Where did they come from? Why is it here? Yeah, good. That's good. So now we move on to Europe, how to acquire knowledge. Back in the 18th century, just after the Enlightenment, there were 2 schools of thought. How many continentals do we have? How many Europeans? Germany, Netherlands, all this stuff. Yes, you guys are the rational ones. Woo! Rationality, right? Ist das wirklich logisch, right? This phrase. So the people on the continent, they thought of everything, all this philosophy on paper. They said, if I was begging on the street, what would I do? If I were the mother of 7 children, how would I act? Whereas the British, they were empiricists. Okay? They would test things out. They would say, well, I was begging on the street, and here's how I felt. Here's how many people stopped to give me coins. Here's how many people passed me. So there was this big competition between thinking it out and kind of testing it. I found this Brexit picture. I searched UK versus Europe, and I just get a bunch of this stuff. But philosophically, it was a huge problem. It was a huge problem. So once you do Occam's razor on yourself, you can start to try to fix your problems. How can I gain knowledge? Am I just going to think it through? Like, how do you learn a language? You just read 20 books? Or do you move to the country and just fail a whole bunch? Might be different for different people. You're going to find your own here. And just a side note, the reason I'm telling you about all these old people is so that you can look them up if it's relevant to you, right? I don't want you to do all this stuff. But when you're examining your own life, if you find that you have problems of identity, you can go more towards this stuff. If you have problems with meaning, we'll get to that in a bit, but you can go to those places. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, guys. You're humans, you're unique, you're a happy, special person, I know. But there have been billions of humans who've been living on this planet for tens of thousands of years. And a lot of us have the same mental processes. We have the same fears, the same desires, and the same problems. So you don't need to struggle through it yourself. You can find out what your problem is and go back to philosophy and read about it and how did they deal with it and try it out. Also around this time, 18th century, rulers in Europe were getting their heads chopped off. Any French people here? They're all together. Cool. Right. Killing kings left and right. What was happening across Europe was that power was being moved from one person to the masses, which sounds cool. The only problem is the masses were stupid. They were uneducated. They didn't know. Didn't have schools. A lot of them didn't understand. Who's neighboring France? The Germans are invading. When you had one ruler, yes, he could be a tyrant or a jerk, but one ruler made all the decisions. One ruler was counseled by the experts, right, in the country. If you have democracy, oh my gosh, we're trusting all these decisions to everybody. So education became increasingly important. How many of you right now trust the government of your home country? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5. Okay, not quite half of you. Not even. What about the educational system? Do you think that your country's educational system is doing an okay job? Okay, a few more, good. But not even half. Not even half of you, right? And we have the internet. We have all the knowledge in my pocket. Oh, it's over there. Timon's got my internet. He's got all my knowledge right on that phone right there. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Next slide, please. There we go. A guy named Hegel, pretty clever guy. The Germans kind of had a monopoly on this philosophy stuff for 100 years, in the 19th to 20th century. Hegel said, here's how we can learn stuff. If we're going to be forced to be a democracy, if we're going to have to get along together, we all have our different philosophies in our heads. So how can we deal with each other, right? I'm hungry. I'm not hungry. I have to pee. I want to go here. What? Hegel said, if you have to pee, you can just leave. By the way. Don't pee in a chair. It's like last time. It always starts with a thesis. Someone has an idea. And then there's always the opposite idea, an antithesis. And between those, you have a synthesis, a compromise. I invent the car. You say cars are dangerous. So we make seatbelts. Okay, right? We move on. The problem is, there's the spirit of the now, right? The zeitgeist is basically how is a society progressing through these syntheses, right? One country might do this 25 times, and they agree and battle and argue and then agree. Another country is stuck in the beginning. So this is very difficult to kind of have two countries come together if they haven't gone through this process yet with their people. And you can do this as a group. You can do this as a team in your office. You can do this in the United Nations at the country level. You can do this in a relationship, right? Like, okay, we'll spend Christmas with your family, but I want you to give me back rubs. Whatever. Time for my Danish friends. Kierkegaard. Yes. Kierkegaard, of course. Soren. Existentialism, before it was called that. Existentialism came from these Germans into the French around the middle of the 20th century. Basically, next one, please. There should be a cliff. Oh, next one. bonus slides. Oh my gosh. Some of you might know about the cliff, the existentialist cliff. They argued that humans were standing near a cliff, but our ankles were chained to the ground. So we don't have a fear of falling off because we're chained. Okay, cool. So that was society for thousands of years. You were not free, but society would protect you. They would keep you from falling off the cliff. The existentialists said, remove the chains. Be free, be yourself. But that includes the fear of possibly falling off the cliff. So it's a responsibility that you take. It's also the angst, right? Existential angst. That maybe, yes, we are nomads, we are free, we can do any business in the world, but what if I don't make any money? Yes. But your job is to become somebody, right? Heidegger talked about they. Ugh. They is like what society wants you to do. Oh, cut your hair, tuck your shirt in, be on time, all these things. He said, yeah, you can be on time, but do it for yourself. Don't do it for them. Do it for yourself. Sarge talked about bad faith. Don't do anything in bad faith. Don't do it. Don't do it to please your mother. Don't do it because you want to feel like, I'm a real boy. No, whatever. Just don't do anything in bad faith. There was a guy named Camus who, much like Epicurus, realized that life is pointless. But instead of being depressed about it, he decided to rebel against the absurdity. He would put on these shows that were just silly. It's like Monty Python type stuff, but in France and earlier. And he was just going to have fun with life, right? He didn't worry about his reputation. He didn't worry about his career, his money. He just said, let's have a big silly act. And then there's this lady here. Anyone know her? A little bit louder. Simone de Beauvoir. Very good. She wrote a book called The Second Sex, maybe one of the 4 most important books of the 20th century. It wasn't that popular though, because she was a female philosopher. And they were like, what? Female philosopher? But if you read it, she actually answers a lot of the problems we have today, but 70 years ago. She already sorted out the answers. Amazing book, highly recommended, no matter who you are. She had this cool idea of redefining feminism. She said that maybe you're born female, but you have to become a woman. And there were different ways that you could become a woman. It wasn't just, ABC. Really clever stuff. And people read this book in America when it was translated to English 7 years later, and were just blown away. Blown away. My mom read this book when she was a teenager, and she was floored. And when she heard I was talking about it during my speech, she said, oh, I'm so happy. I have a copy. Do you want to take it with you? I'm like, no, Mom, my bag is 10 kilos. This book is big. Anyway, good book, good book, good book. So read it. Next slide. I said the word sex, so we can't skip Freud. That's not Freud, that's Nietzsche. But real quick on Freud. Freud had the ego, the superego. When you guys are waking up in the morning, maybe you have a cabin to yourself. This is the ego. You're doing your own thing. You have your own music, you get your breakfast, you choose your own clothes, you can jam out to your podcast, whatever. But when you come to the conference, then you have to start following rules. Sit down, be quiet, wear your name tag, this and that. That's the superego. Now you're following someone else's prescribed way of behaving. And Freud talked about you have to be very aware of how you switch gears in your mind throughout the day. Like, I'm doing stuff for myself that I like, and now I'm conforming, and I have to live in a box. There's rules, and I have to be careful where I step. Right? Another way you can be aware. And finally, last blue card. Woo! You guys are nomads. You're already following pragmatism. Pragmatism means nothing matters unless it affects me. Sounds selfish, but it depends on how big your definition of me is. We have some vegans in the audience. Some quiet vegans. They raise their hands. Maybe their image of myself is a larger global kind of perspective, and they say, yes, I don't want to do anything that hurts my my world and all. Maybe someone else is very selfish and they just care about themselves, not their mother, not their neighbor, like that. But pragmatism means, hey, if we landed on the moon, I don't care. I'm not on the moon. I don't care. But if they put poison in the eggs for breakfast, I care because I ate those eggs. Anyone else have the eggs today? Yeah, not good, right? You like the eggs? Oh, I'm going over here. You guys didn't like the eggs. Anyway, my last note here about the nomads, long distance relationships, car insurance. All right. I'm gonna leave some time for questions and answers. So, Nietzsche, big mustache. I want you guys to turn to your neighbor and do this. Do it. Nietzsche. Good. I'm gonna leave you with a quote. Dare to become what you are. Dare to become in the future what you are now. You all have an idea of who you are, hopefully. Dare to become that. Choose your own virtues. Pretty cool. So what's the meaning of life? Whatever you want it to be. But stick to it. Don't be wishy-washy and keep changing it all the time, okay? So pick something in the next 2 weeks. Be inspired by these flashy nomads, right? And if you're the leader of a project or a team or the head of a family or the oldest sibling, whatever, right? Pick a philosophy. Try to live by something. It'll give you actual meaning. You'll feel good. And the 3 takeaways. They told me that I should have takeaways. Here we go. Number 1, focus on the small things. All right? Don't ignore the phenomenon that happen every day. It's kind of like your brain's journal. It's kind of cool. Number 2, look to the past. Famous philosopher. Oh, I can do this line one more time. Yes. Number 2, pick some famous philosophy stuff and read about it. See if it matches up with you. And number 3, microdose these philosophies throughout the day. Take a moment here or a moment there when you're doing your laundry and say, what does this have to do with my meaning? What does this have to do with my purpose? Maybe nothing. But check it out. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Curtin. I don't know what was more interesting, the message that you wanted to tell us or your presentation. So as you can see, Curtin made a mess here, so let's just have a 10 minutes break, toilet break, and in 10 minutes we're gonna continue. See you guys here.